They say peace comes with age. Whoever said that never lived long enough to be betrayed by their own child. My mornings used to begin with sunlight and a hymn playing softly from the kitchen radio. Now they begin with a question I can't shake. When did my daughter stop loving me and start seeing me as a bank account? I've lived in this house for 43 years, and I still wake up every morning surprised by how quiet it is without Harold's laugh echoing down the hallway. The sun always finds the same path through our kitchen window, spilling across the worn oak table he built himself. I still set 2 cups of tea, out of habit more than hope, mine with honey, his with sugar, old rituals that refuse to die even when the people do. Our home sits at the edge of Maple Grove, a slow, peaceful suburb where everyone knows who planted which rose bush. My days have softened into gentle routines, a short walk to the corner shop, watering the hydrangeas Harold adored, and an afternoon chat with Mrs. Patel from next door. She brings me spicy lentil soup every Thursday and scolds me for skipping meals. She says I look thinner every week, and I tell her that's what happens when you argue with memories more than people. The rooms feel larger lately, almost echoing. The laughter of my grandchildren used to bounce off these walls, but they visit less since Lydia started managing the family schedule. My daughter calls it structure. I call it distance. Still, she means well. At least, that's what I told myself. Last week, she mentioned again how unsafe it was for me to live alone in such a big house. "Mom," she said, running her manicured fingers across the table Harold made, "you could sell this place, buy a cozy condo, and still have enough left to travel." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes flickered with something else. Calculation, maybe. I brushed it off. She's always been practical. Like her father, I thought. That morning, as I watched the sunlight crawl across the old floorboards, I felt a twinge of something unfamiliar. Not fear, exactly, but a tremor in my certainty. For the first time, this house didn't feel like a fortress of memories. It felt like a secret someone else had started to open. One drawer at a time, and though I didn't know it yet, the hands prying at those drawers were my own daughter's. It was a Thursday morning in late April when Lydia came by, unannounced, her car crunching across the gravel like it owned the place. The house was still waking up, the kettle whistling, the radio murmuring old jazz, when I saw her silhouette through the frosted glass of the front door. She never knocked softly. She always pressed the bell like she was ringing for service. "Mom," she called, bright as sunlight and twice as invasive. "I brought croissants." She swept in smelling of perfume and city air, her heels clicking across Harold's old parquet floor. Lydia always looked expensive. Even her smiles came tailored. She kissed my cheek lightly and placed a white paper bag on the counter. Already rearranging the kitchen like she used to when she was 12 and thought she knew better than everyone. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, opening cabinets to find plates I didn't ask for. "Thought I'd check on my favorite girl." I smiled, the way mothers do when their instincts whisper warnings they're not ready to hear. "Your favorite girl seems to be managing fine." She glanced around. "Still no microwave, huh?" "Mom, how do you survive?" I poured her tea, even though she never finished it. Lydia wasn't one for sitting still. She liked motion, progress, results. She talked as if time owed her success, and everyone else was late delivering it. She'd become a real estate agent 2 years after Harold's passing. I remember how proud I felt then. My daughter helping families find homes the way Harold helped build them. But now, every conversation somehow turned toward property values, market surges, investment opportunities. Even grief had become something to be leveraged. "Mom, I was looking at some listings in your area," she began between sips. "You'd be shocked how much this place is worth now. The market's insane. You could sell and buy something smaller, more modern, maybe near me and the kids." I stirred my tea slowly. "This house isn't an investment, Lydia. It's where your father and I built a life. I know, she said quickly, brushing it off with a laugh. I'm just saying you'd have freedom. You could travel, visit us more. You hate mowing the lawn anyway. Her tone was sugar, but her eyes darted toward the framed photograph on the mantel. Harold and me standing in front of this very house, the sold sign leaning sideways in the grass. He looked so proud, his arm around me, both of us too young to imagine what 40 years later would look like. Lydia followed my gaze, smiled faintly, then pulled out her tablet. Look, I can show you some numbers. I did a quick comparative analysis. Analysis? I repeated. You came for tea, not business. I know, she said, waving her hand as if the air itself were overreacting. I just like keeping you informed. I watched her scroll through images of shiny condos, stainless steel kitchens, rooftop decks, smiling neighbors who didn't know each other's names. They all looked sterile, soulless, not a chipped mug in sight. She leaned in, tapping the screen. See this one? Elevator access, security system, walking distance to everything. You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance or bills or memories? I interrupted softly. She paused, lips tightening. Mom, you can't live in memories. Why not? I said. They're paid for. The words caught her off guard. For a second, she looked almost guilty. Then she laughed it away and changed the subject to my health. The oldest trick in the book. You've been forgetting things lately, haven't you? You called me twice last week to ask the same question. I frowned. I was confirming our lunch. Exactly, she said gently. It's nothing to worry about, but maybe it's time we think about simplifying things. You know, less stress. Simplifying. That word rolled off her tongue like an order disguised as advice. She always dressed control and concern. By the time she left, the croissants had gone cold, untouched. She kissed my cheek again and promised to help with some paperwork next week. I watched her car pull away, its polished surface reflecting my house like it already belonged to her. When the silence returned, it felt different, heavier. I stood by the window, staring at the spot where Harold used to plant his tulips each spring. The soil was bare now, waiting for someone to tend it, someone who still remembered the difference between roots and weeds. I told myself Lydia meant well. Children always do, until they forget that love and ownership aren't the same thing. But as the wind rustled through the empty garden, I couldn't shake the feeling that something more than croissants had been delivered that morning. Something colder, sharper. A plan, wrapped in affection. And I, foolishly comforted by the word daughter, had just let it through my door. The following Tuesday arrived gray and damp, the kind of day that makes everything feel slower, softer, like the world itself is tired. I was halfway through folding laundry when Lydia called. Mom, I'm coming by this afternoon, she said cheerfully. Just need you to sign a few small documents for property tax updates. Nothing complicated. I hesitated. Property taxes? I already paid them last month. Oh, no, this is just a reassessment form for senior exemptions, she explained quickly. It'll lower your yearly amount. I talked to a friend at the county office. Trust me, it's good news. She always had that phrase ready. Trust me. And every time she said it, I felt like I was being asked to step off a cliff with my eyes closed. By 4 o'clock, she was in the kitchen again, spreading papers across the table as if it were her office desk. She wore her realtor smile, polished, professional, the kind that could convince anyone to sell their childhood home and thank her for it. There's just a few spots for your signature, she said, uncapping a pen. See? Here and here. The stack wasn't thick, but the pages were covered in dense paragraphs. The kind of legal jargon that makes even the sharpest mind hesitate. Words like transfer, authorization, power of representation. My eyes blurred halfway through the first page. I don't understand all of this, I admitted, adjusting my glasses. That's why I'm here, Lydia said smoothly, her hand light on my shoulder. It's standard paperwork. You're just giving me permission to handle filings on your behalf. It'll save you time. Her tone was gentle, reassuring. The same tone she used on her children when they resisted bedtime. And just like them, I gave in. I signed where she pointed, the pen trembling slightly in my hand. When I finished, she gathered the papers swiftly, tucking them into a leather folder. "Perfect," she said brightly. "You'll thank me when your tax bill drops next year?" I smiled, uneasy, but too tired to argue. "I'm sure I will." After she left, the kitchen felt oddly empty, like something had been removed besides her presence. The table still smelled faintly of her perfume, sharp, synthetic, lingering long after the truth should have. That evening, Mrs. Patel stopped by with her usual thermos of soup. "You look pale, Margaret," she said, setting it down. "Everything all right?" "Just paperwork," I murmured. "Lydia says it's for taxes." Mrs. Patel raised an eyebrow. "Your daughter, the realtor? You trust her with government forms?" I laughed softly. "She's family." "That doesn't always mean safe," she replied, half joking, half serious. "My cousin once sold her brother's land without telling him." I waved off her story, though her words sat heavier than I wanted to admit. Later that night, while washing dishes, I noticed the folder imprint Lydia's papers had left on the table. A faint rectangular shadow, as though the house itself remembered their weight. Something about it unsettled me. I told myself it was nothing. But then, over the next few days, small changes began to appear. Mail started arriving addressed to L. Turner, co-owner. The electric bill had a new contact number, not mine. When I called the company, the polite woman on the line said, "Yes, ma'am, your daughter authorized the change last week." Authorized. The word stuck like a splinter. When I asked Lydia about it, she laughed. "Oh, Mom, relax. I just updated your account info so I can monitor payments for you. You always forget due dates." "I don't forget," I said quietly. She waved her manicured hand. "Well, you don't have to worry about it anymore. Let me handle things. You've earned your rest." That phrase, "earned your rest," landed wrong, like a eulogy said too soon. 2 weeks later, a man in a crisp navy suit appeared at my door holding a clipboard. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said. "I'm here to take photographs of the property." "Photographs?" I repeated, confused. "Yes, for the listing." "What listing?" He blinked. "The real estate listing. Turner and Company. It says here the homeowner authorized professional staging and pre-sale photos." I must have gone pale because he quickly backtracked. "I can double-check the address, ma'am. Maybe there's a mistake." "Yes," I said, my voice trembling. "There must be." After he left, I called Lydia, straight to voicemail, again and again. Finally, she texted, "Don't worry, Mom. It's a mix-up. I'll fix it tomorrow. Love you." But the next morning, she didn't show up. That evening, Mrs. Patel spotted her at a cafe downtown, laughing with another agent, papers spread across their table. A glossy photo of my house in plain view. "Margaret," she told me the next day, her voice hushed with disbelief. "Your daughter's selling your home." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "That's impossible." "She wouldn't." Mrs. Patel placed her hand gently over mine. "Then why is your garden on her brochure?" I wanted to believe there was some explanation, a clerical error, a miscommunication, anything but deceit. But deep down, a small, cruel certainty began to grow. The documents I had signed weren't about taxes or exemptions. They were the keys I had handed her, willingly, lovingly, to my entire life. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the space where those papers had once lain. The same table where Harold and I had planned our future, celebrated anniversaries, raised toasts to the family we thought we'd built on trust. Now it was just me, a cold cup of tea, and the faint scent of my daughter's perfume. The kind that never really leaves, no matter how many windows you open. It's strange how betrayal doesn't announce itself. It arrives in whispers, in phone calls that end when you enter the room, in laughter that doesn't quite include you, in moments that feel just a little off. After the day the photographer came, Lydia began visiting more often, but her presence no longer comforted me. She arrived with folders and files, not hugs or conversation. Her voice had taken on that firm, professional cadence, half daughter, half realtor. "Mom, I just need to make a few quick calls, okay?" she'd say, already stepping out to the porch with her phone pressed to her ear. At first, I tried not to listen. I'd busy myself with tea or dusting the mantel. But one morning, while trimming my geraniums by the kitchen window, I caught her voice through the open door. Sharp and efficient. "Yes, the house is still available," she said. "We can schedule a showing next week. The owner's transitioning soon." The word owner sliced through me. I froze, pruning shears in midair. The rest of her words blurred together. Prices, appraisals, contracts. She hung up a minute later, smiling when she came back inside, as though nothing in the world was amiss. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "Oh, just a client," she said lightly, brushing invisible lint off her jacket. "You know how it is." But I didn't. I didn't know how it was to hear your own home discussed like merchandise. That evening, I called Ethan, her husband. His voice was uneasy, careful. "Margaret, I'm sure there's some misunderstanding," he said. "Lydia's been under stress at work, that's all." Maybe he believed that. Maybe he wanted to. The following week, a white SUV idled outside my house for several minutes. Two people stepped out, pointing toward the porch and scribbling notes. When I opened the door to ask what they were doing, they quickly left, saying, "We're just looking." Looking at what? My garden? My memories? Mrs. Patel started noticing things too. "There was a man on your porch yesterday," she told me one afternoon. "He had a clipboard. He took pictures of your front door." "Probably insurance," I said weakly, though even I didn't believe it anymore. At night, I began checking the locks twice. I started keeping the curtains drawn. The house felt less like a home and more like a prize waiting to be claimed. Then came the subtle rearrangements. The framed photos of Harold and me disappeared from the hallway. Lydia had put them away to declutter. My favorite quilt vanished from the couch because it looked dated. Every visit, she stripped away another small piece of me under the pretense of modernization. The silence between us grew thick with unspoken truths. One day, while she was on another call, I lingered near the hallway just long enough to hear her whisper, "Yes, she's still here. No, don't worry. I'll handle it, as if I were the problem." That night, I sat on the porch long after the lights went out across Maple Grove. The air smelled faintly of rain and lilacs, but even the scent of comfort felt foreign now. My thoughts circled back to Harold. What he would say if he knew. He'd always trusted Lydia too much. "She's got your fire," he used to say proudly. Maybe she did, but fire can warm, or it can consume. The next morning, I found a letter from the bank, one I hadn't seen before, addressed to both Margaret Turner and Lydia Turner. My hands shook as I tore it open. It confirmed an account update authorizing shared access for property-related transactions. I sat at the table for nearly an hour, reading the letter over and over. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, marking each passing second of my disbelief. When Lydia came that afternoon, I confronted her, quietly at first. "I got a letter from the bank," I said. "It had your name on it." She didn't even flinch. "Oh, that," she said breezily. "I just set up a joint account for property taxes and utilities. It's easier that way." "Without telling me?" She sighed, as though I were a child asking too many questions. "Mom, you worry too much." "I'm just trying to help." Her voice softened then, practiced and sweet. "You know I love you. I just want what's best for you." And maybe that was the cruelest part, that she said it with such conviction I almost wanted to believe her. When she left, I stood in the doorway watching her drive away, the sound of gravel grinding under her tires. The house behind me seemed to sigh, a long, tired exhale. Mrs. Patel found me there minutes later. "Something's wrong, isn't it?" she asked. I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think my daughter is selling my life, one signature at a time." It happened on a Sunday, the kind of quiet morning when even the birds seemed too polite to sing. I'd gone to church like I always did, wearing Harold's favorite brooch, the silver one shaped like a lily. The sermon had been about trust, about how faith was built not on proof, but on belief. I remember thinking how comforting that sounded, until I came home and found belief no longer enough. As I turned onto Maple Grove, something felt wrong. My driveway was full. 3 cars parked crookedly on the gravel, their engines still warm. Through the front window, I caught movement. People. Strangers. I froze on the walkway, clutching my purse like a shield. A young couple stepped out onto my porch, smiling politely as if I were the intruder. "Lovely place," the woman said. "Your daughter said you might be out." "My daughter?" "Yes, Lydia. She said you're moving to a condo near her. Said she's handling the sale." The word sale echoed in my head, loud and hollow. I brushed past them without another word, pushing open the door. The scent of lemon polish and perfume hit me at once. Too clean, too staged. My curtains were tied back, my photographs rearranged. My home no longer looked like mine. It looked like a model house, soulless and neat, as if it had never belonged to anyone at all. A man in a blazer was in the living room, clipboard in hand. He smiled broadly. "Ah, Mrs. Turner, I didn't realize you'd be here. Don't worry, we'll be wrapped up soon. Lydia said you preferred not to be involved in the showings." I could barely form words. "Showings?" He looked confused, then cautious. "Yes. The open house? Scheduled for 11 to 2? It was 10:45. Before I could answer, Lydia appeared at the top of the stairs, her heels clicking against the wood like gavel strikes. "Mom!" "You're early," she said, as if I were the one in the wrong. "What is this?" I demanded. "Who are these people?" She sighed, exasperated, like I was being difficult. "Mom, calm down. This is just an initial showing. No one's signing anything yet." "Showing?" My voice trembled. "You're selling my home." She descended the stairs slowly, smoothing her hair. "Our home, technically. You signed the authorization, remember? It's already in process." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My eyes darted to the papers framed on the entry table, the ones she'd asked me to sign for taxes. The same signature stared back at me, black ink against betrayal. "Lydia," I whispered, "how could you?" Her face hardened, the mask slipping. "Mom, be reasonable. You can't manage this place anymore. You forget things, you fall behind on bills. I'm trying to protect you." "By stealing from me?" She flinched, her voice rising. "Don't be dramatic. You'll thank me when you're comfortable and safe. You don't need this house. It's too much for you." The young couple from outside had drifted back in, sensing a scene. I turned away from them, my cheeks burning with humiliation. The walls felt too bright, the air too thin. My sanctuary had been turned into a marketplace. Mrs. Patel must have seen the cars, because moments later, she appeared in the doorway. "Margaret?" she said softly, eyes widening at the sight of strangers wandering through the kitchen. "What's happening?" "My daughter," I said quietly. "She's selling my house." Mrs. Patel's expression turned to steel. "Not today, she isn't." Lydia rolled her eyes. "Please, this is a family matter." Mrs. Patel stepped forward, voice steady. "Then act like family." For the first time, Lydia faltered. The agent cleared his throat, sensing the tension. "Perhaps we should reschedule," he said gently, ushering the couple out. They left awkwardly, whispering apologies. The door shut, and silence fell. Lydia's eyes were cold now. "You've embarrassed me," she snapped. I stared at her, something in me breaking but also hardening. "No," I said softly. "You've embarrassed yourself." She snatched her folder from the table, gathering her things. "Fine. If you want to make this difficult, I'll handle it legally." She stormed out, the sound of her heels fading down the driveway. Mrs. Patel placed a trembling hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone, Margaret," she said. "Not anymore." I nodded, though my voice was gone. Around me, the rooms felt foreign. Every photo straightened, every cushion adjusted, every trace of Harold in me erased by her ambition. That night, I sat in the dark living room, the faint scent of polish still lingering. Outside, the for sale sign leaned against the fence, half hidden in the shadows. It wasn't planted yet, but I knew it would be soon. And when it was, I promised myself, I would be ready. The days that followed felt like someone had drawn the curtains on my life. Light still seeped through, but nothing looked the same. Lydia no longer asked for permission. She simply informed me. Everything was handled, arranged, or taken care of, as though I'd become a fragile ornament in my own home. It started small. She transferred the utility bills to make things easier. The mail began arriving already opened, tucked neatly into envelopes with her handwriting on them. When I asked why, she said, "Oh, I stopped by the post office to collect it early. You shouldn't have to walk that far." I didn't remember giving her a key, but one day I found her already inside, rearranging my pantry. "You never lock the back door," she said lightly. "I worry about your safety." Then came the phone calls. My friends from church stopped inviting me to lunch. One of them, Linda, sounded hesitant when she finally called. "Lydia said you were thinking of moving soon," she said. "We didn't want to make plans if you were packing." I stared at the phone long after the call ended. Moving soon? I hadn't said a word about that, but the story had already been told. By my own daughter. Mrs. Patel came by less often, too. She said Lydia told her I needed quiet time, that I was under stress. I suppose Lydia wasn't entirely wrong about that part. Every corner of the house began to echo with her presence. The calendar on the fridge was now written in her tidy handwriting. Doctor's appointment, bank meeting, condo viewing. My handwriting, once full of little flourishes Harold used to tease me about, had disappeared. When I asked about my finances, she gave me half answers. "Everything's in order," she'd say, typing furiously on her phone. "I moved some funds to keep things secure." "Secure from what?" I asked. "From mistakes, Mom." "You've been forgetting a lot lately." Her tone was soft, patronizing, like she was comforting a child too simple to understand. It made my stomach twist. The turning point came one morning when I tried to pay for groceries. My debit card was declined. The cashier, kind but awkward, whispered that the account was inactive. I stood there with my basket of oranges and bread, feeling my face burn as if the whole world had just discovered how powerless I'd become. When I called the bank, they told me Lydia had been listed as joint account holder. "For convenience," the clerk said, "we assumed it was authorized." That evening, I waited for Lydia on the porch. When she arrived, she looked startled to see me outside. "Why did you touch my account?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She sighed and set her bag down. "Mom, it's not your account anymore. It's ours. I've been paying your bills, managing everything. You should be grateful." "Grateful?" I repeated softly. "For what? Losing control of my own life?" Her eyes hardened. "For having someone who cares enough to protect you from yourself." Something in me broke then, not loudly, but like glass cracking under slow pressure. When she went inside to make tea, I lingered on the porch steps, the evening air heavy with the scent of rain. Across the fence, Mrs. Patel was watering her plants. She caught my eye, hesitated, then asked quietly, "You all right, Margaret?" I almost lied, but instead, the truth slipped out like a sigh. No, I said, my daughter's turning me into a ghost. Mrs. Patel's watering can stilled. Not if I can help it, she said firmly. The next day, Lydia announced she'd changed my phone plan to a simpler package. When I picked up the receiver later that week, the line was dead. No calls, no internet, no connection to the world beyond her control. I sat at the kitchen table that night, the silence loud enough to fill every corner. The refrigerator hummed softly. The clock ticked on the wall. And in that small, relentless rhythm, I heard what Harold once told me. The moment someone stops trusting you, they start rewriting your story. And Lydia, my own child, was already halfway through rewriting mine. It was a Wednesday morning when the truth finally came knocking, quietly, politely, as if it didn't want to disturb me too much. The sky hung low, bruised with the promise of rain. I was dusting the bookshelves in the living room when Mrs. Patel appeared at the back door, her umbrella dripping and her face pale. "Margaret," she said, her voice tight, "you need to see something." She held up her phone, its screen glowing through the raindrops. "I was looking at listings online," she explained, "just browsing." But then I saw this. The photo on her screen stopped my breath. My living room, my curtains, my rug, the framed photo of Harold still visible on the mantel. Underneath it, bold letters read, "For sale, spacious family home in Maple Grove. Owner relocating. Quick sale preferred." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The room tilted around me, the ticking clock suddenly deafening. "That can't be right," I whispered. That's my home." Mrs. Patel nodded grimly. "It's listed by Turner and Company. Realty, Lydia Turner." The name hit me like a blow. I sank into Harold's old armchair, clutching the armrest to steady myself. "No," I said softly, shaking my head. "She told me the paperwork was for taxes. She said she was helping." Mrs. Patel sat beside me, her eyes kind but fierce. "She's not helping, Margaret. She's selling it right out from under you." I took her phone, my fingers trembling, scrolling through the photos. The garden I tended every spring, the kitchen where Harold used to hum while cooking, the bedroom where I still whispered goodnight to his memory. Each image looked clean, staged, stripped of life, my life. And then I saw the asking price. It was high, too high for someone looking for a quick sale. She wasn't desperate. She was greedy. A strange calm came over me then, the kind that feels less like peace and more like the moment before a storm breaks. "I need to talk to her," I said. Mrs. Patel caught my hand. "Don't go alone." But I did. When Lydia opened her door that afternoon, she looked startled, then irritated. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "You should have called first." I held out my phone, the listing glowing bright between us. "Explain this." Her smile faltered. "Oh, you saw that." "That?" My voice shook. "That is my house." "Mom, please, lower your voice. It's complicated." "No," I said. "It's simple. You forged my signature and listed my home. Why?" She crossed her arms, her tone sliding into practiced patience. "I didn't forge anything. You signed those papers yourself. You just didn't read them." The words stung more than I expected. She wasn't even denying it, just shifting the blame neatly onto me, like rearranging furniture. "Lydia," I said quietly, "I trusted you." She sighed. "And you should keep trusting me. This is for your own good. Once the sale goes through, you'll have money, comfort, no stress. Isn't that what you want?" "What I want," I said, "is to live in the home your father built. The one where you took your first steps. The one he poured his soul into." Her face hardened. "Dad's gone, Mom." "You can't keep living like he's going to walk through that door any day now." The silence that followed was colder than any winter. I realized then that the daughter standing in front of me wasn't the little girl Harold and I had raised with bedtime stories and scraped knees. This was someone else, someone who saw my memories as marketable square footage. When I spoke again, my voice was steady, though my hands trembled. If you go through with this, Lydia, you'll lose more than this house. She blinked. Are you threatening me? No, I said. I'm warning you. I left before the tears came, the sound of her front door closing behind me like a final punctuation mark. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt alive, restless, whispering in creaks and sighs. Every corner carried a memory, and every memory now felt stolen. I sat at the kitchen table, the glow of Mrs. Patel's printed listing beside me. I traced the photo of the front porch with my fingertip and whispered into the dark. I'm not letting you take this, Lydia. Not while I'm still breathing. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled, low and distant, like the house itself was promising it would stand its ground. And so would I. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The house was still, the kind of silence that feels alive, listening. My mind replayed every word Lydia had said the day before. You signed it yourself. You just didn't read it. It wasn't guilt that woke me. It was the realization that she might be right. I had signed without reading, blinded by the illusion that family doesn't need fine print. I sat at the kitchen table as the first light filtered through the curtains, illuminating Harold's old briefcase on the shelf. He'd been meticulous about records, receipts, letters, even warranty cards from 20 years ago. I opened the case, half hoping to find something useful, half just needing to touch a piece of his orderliness. Among the papers was a yellowing business card. Robert Green, attorney at law, Harold's lawyer. A decent man who'd handled our wills when Harold got sick. I hadn't thought of him in years, but as I traced the raised letters with my thumb, I felt something click into place, like a key finally turning in a lock. I called his office that afternoon. His assistant sounded surprised to hear from me, but kind. Mr. Green still remembers you, Mrs. Turner, she said. He's semi-retired now, but I'll make sure he calls you back. He did, just before dinner. His voice was older, raspier, but steady. Margaret, he said warmly, it's been too long. What can I do for you? I hesitated. I think my daughter tricked me into signing something important. Something about my house. He was silent for a beat, then said quietly, Do you have copies of the papers? No, she took them with her. Then I'll come to you, he said, tomorrow morning. When he arrived, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. He still wore the same tan coat and carried that battered leather briefcase, the same one he'd set down on my coffee table years ago when he told Harold the trust paperwork was done. He listened without interrupting as I told him everything, from the day Lydia brought the first forms to the open house to the listing I'd seen online. When I finished, he nodded slowly. Do you remember signing a power of attorney form? I remember her saying it was for taxes. He sighed. That's a common tactic. She could have slipped a property transfer authorization in there. Without your copy, it'll be hard to prove, but not impossible. He opened his briefcase, pulling out a small notepad. From what you've said, she's committing both fraud and forgery. We can't confront her yet. Let's verify first. I'll have my office pull the property deed and see whose name it's under now. Whose name it's under now? The words chilled me. He gave me a small, reassuring smile. Don't lose hope. Paper trails tell stories even liars can't erase. After he left, I started noticing everything differently. Lydia's visits, her phone calls, they all felt like acts in a play I was finally seeing from the audience's perspective. I began to listen. I found a small notebook and began writing everything down. The dates she came, what she said, who called her. It wasn't anger that guided me. It was clarity. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was recording. A few days later, she came by with another folder. "Just some closing adjustments," she said. "Closing?" I asked, my tone mild. "Oh, it's just terminology, Mom." "Don't worry, this time I didn't sign." I smiled, nodded, and said, "Leave them with me. I'll look them over." She hesitated, then smiled back too quickly. "Of course." When she left, I photographed every page with my old phone. That evening, I called Mr. Green again. "I have the papers," I said. The next morning, he confirmed what I already feared. "Margaret, these are fraudulent. 2 signatures aren't yours. They were copied." Sloppy work, but convincing enough for someone who wants quick results. I felt my hands go cold. "So she—" "Yes, she forged them." He paused, his voice softening. "We'll need to be careful now. If she knows you've caught on, she might move faster. Don't confront her again until I have the deed. Meanwhile, keep everything. Texts, voicemails, even envelopes." That night, I set up an old tape recorder Harold once used to capture his lectures. I placed it under the kitchen counter, tucked behind the flour canister. When Lydia came next, I would be ready. As I checked the recorder's tiny red light, I whispered to myself, if she wants to play smart, she'll meet her match. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the old maple tree. For the first time in weeks, the house didn't feel helpless. It felt like a witness, quiet, steady, waiting for its story to be told. And so was I. The days that followed felt like walking through fog, every sound muted, every thought sharpened. I moved carefully, saying less, noticing more. Lydia still came by twice a week, cheerful as ever, pretending nothing had changed. But I had changed. I had stopped being her mother in those moments. I had become her silent witness. Mr. Green called 3 days later. His voice, though calm, carried weight. "Margaret," he said, "the preliminary records are in." The property title was temporarily reassigned. It's listed under a holding company, LTM Realty. "LTM?" I whispered. "Lydia Turner, Maple Grove." Exactly. The confirmation didn't shatter me. It focused me. I'd spent weeks feeling like a ghost in my own home. Now I was flesh and blood again, and every breath had purpose. Mr. Green had a plan. "We can't alert her yet," he said. "If she senses you know, she'll liquidate assets or claim coercion. We'll build a case quietly. I'll document the forgery, the false transfer, and her communications. In the meantime, keep her talking. Naturally. Let her reveal herself." So I did. I charged the old tape recorder every night and placed it in different rooms each time Lydia visited. It was almost easy. She spoke too much, too confidently. One afternoon, she came in clutching her phone, pacing near the dining table. "I told them the inspection's done," she said to whoever was on the line. "Yes, my mother's ready to move. No, she doesn't want to meet buyers. She's delicate." Her voice dropped to a whisper, but I caught the words, "closing in 3 weeks." When she hung up, I smiled from my chair. "Busy day?" I asked. "Oh, just clients," she said too quickly. "Anyone I know?" She laughed. "You wouldn't care about business details, Mom." I nodded, hiding the flicker of the recorder light under the tablecloth. Later that evening, I called Mr. Green and played him the audio. He listened quietly. "Perfect," he said. "This is exactly what we need. Keep collecting." Every statement helps establish intent. The plan began to take shape. Green drafted letters to the county clerk and filed a preliminary injunction to freeze the property's legal status without Lydia's knowledge. It was like watching someone quietly sew a net, while the prey still strutted around unaware. Meanwhile, Lydia grew bolder. She started bringing movers pamphlets, brochures for senior condos, even catalogs for minimalist furniture. "You'll love it there," she said one morning. "Fresh start, smaller space, fewer worries." I smiled and nodded. Maybe, I said, but what about all of Harold's tools? And his books? Oh, Mom, just donate them. You don't need all that clutter. Her voice was syrup, but her eyes gleamed with impatience. She was already living a future built on my displacement. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, the moonlight silvering the old floorboards Harold once polished by hand. I thought about the way he used to say, "Always keep your receipts, Maggie. Paper is proof when memory fails," so I did just that. I gathered everything. Bank letters, text messages, envelopes she'd signed, even the tiny note she left once on the fridge. Called appraiser. Don't forget to pack. I tucked it all neatly into a folder marked with the single word, truth. The following week, Mr. Green came by again, this time with quiet satisfaction in his voice. I've got the proof of the forgery. The signatures don't match your legal records. It's airtight. He spread the documents across the same kitchen table where Lydia had once spread hers. But this time, I wasn't the fool signing away my home. I was the one taking it back. "We'll time this right," he said. "Let her think she's in control. The moment she initiates the final transfer, we'll stop it cold." "Will she go to jail?" I asked softly. "Most likely," he said, "but that's up to you. We can press charges, or simply take everything back quietly." I looked around the kitchen, at the faint grooves in the wood Harold carved decades ago. I thought of Lydia as a little girl, swinging her legs at this very table, asking for another story before bed. Somewhere between then and now, I had lost her. Maybe greed had found the empty spaces I didn't fill. "I just want her stopped," I said finally, "not destroyed." Mr. Green nodded. "Then we'll make sure she learns what truth costs." When he left, I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, the photographs. The house no longer felt helpless. It felt watchful, alert. The next morning, Lydia called. "Good news, Mom!" "Everything's ready for closing. We'll finalize soon." I smiled into the phone. "Wonderful, dear. Why don't you come by tomorrow? I'll make tea." As I hung up, I looked at the recorder glowing faintly beside the kettle. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait. It was late evening when the knock came, a soft, hesitant sound, almost apologetic. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, I feared Lydia had decided to drop by unannounced again. My heart tightened as I opened the door, only to find Ethan standing there, rain dripping from his coat, his face pale with something heavier than exhaustion. "Mr. Turner?" I said, startled. "Is everything all right?" He shook his head slowly. "No, Margaret," he said quietly. "It's not." I led him inside, motioning toward the kitchen table. The air smelled faintly of the chamomile tea I'd brewed earlier. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he stood by the chair, gripping the back of it like a confession booth. "I shouldn't be here," he began. "Lydia doesn't know I came. She'd lose it if she found out." "Then why are you here, Ethan?" I asked softly. He hesitated, then looked up. His eyes were rimmed red, the kind of tired that doesn't come from work, but from living with secrets. "Because I can't keep pretending anymore," he said. "I thought she was just helping you." "That's what she told me, that you wanted to sell the house, that you were struggling to keep up. But when I saw the paperwork, I knew something wasn't right." He ran a hand through his hair, trembling slightly. "She had me sign documents, too. Said they were for legal assurance, part of the transfer. But I read them this time. They weren't about taxes or maintenance. They were investment papers." My breath caught. "Investment?" He nodded. "She used your property as collateral for a development loan. She's trying to buy into a luxury real estate project downtown. If the deal goes through, she gets a cut. If it fails..." He paused, the words catching like stones in his throat. "You lose everything." The room seemed to shrink around us. My hands went cold against the teacup I hadn't realized I was holding. "So it was never about helping me," I whispered. It was about money. Ethan's voice cracked. She told herself it was both. She said she was securing your future, that you'd thank her later. But Margaret, she knows what she's doing is wrong. She just doesn't care anymore. He sank into the chair at last, shoulders slumped. I've tried talking to her. She won't listen. She says you've had your turn with life, and now it's hers. I can't watch her do this to you. I studied him for a moment, the rain tapping softly against the window pane. There was something tragic in his honesty, like a man trying to wash his hands clean in water that only deepened the stains. Why are you telling me this now? I asked gently. Because I found something, he said, reaching into his coat. He pulled out a folded paper, creased from being handled too much. It's a copy of the buyer's agreement she plans to sign next week. She's already taken a deposit, $50,000 in cash. I took the paper with trembling fingers. There in black ink was my address, my name, my home, listed like an item on a shelf. The anger didn't come all at once. It seeped in slowly, rising through my chest like heat after a long freeze. She took money for a house that isn't hers, I said. Ethan nodded, shame flickering across his face. I told her it was fraud. She said it was business. I folded the paper neatly, setting it on the table beside the teacup. My voice came out calm, steadier than I felt. Thank you for bringing this, Ethan. You've done the right thing. He looked up, desperate. Will you press charges? I took a long breath, glancing at Harold's photograph hanging near the kitchen doorway. I don't know yet, I said, but I won't let her take what isn't hers. He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. She's not always been like this, you know. She used to care. She used to talk about you like you were her compass. I don't know when she lost her way. Greed doesn't arrive suddenly, I said softly. It grows quietly, like rot beneath paint. Ethan stood, fumbling for his car keys. Mr. Green needs to see that document, I told him. He's helping me. It's time she learns the cost of deceit. He hesitated at the door. Be careful, Margaret. Lydia, she won't go down quietly. I offered him a faint smile. Neither will I. After he left, I locked the door and sat back down at the table. The rain outside had turned into a steady downpour, beating against the roof like a warning drum. I unfolded the paper once more, reading every word until they blurred together. It wasn't grief that filled me this time. It was clarity. Lydia's mask had finally slipped, and in its place stood the truth. My daughter, the woman I'd raised with love and trust, had turned my home into her stepping stone. But she had forgotten one thing. She wasn't the only one who knew how to build something and rebuild it when someone tried to tear it down. Tomorrow, I would call Mr. Green. The game she started was about to end, and this time, the rules would be mine. It was a Sunday evening, cool, golden, deceptively peaceful. The kind of day that looks like forgiveness, but smells like judgment. I'd spent the morning baking, the scent of cinnamon and butter filling the house the way it used to when Lydia was little. I wanted everything calm, ordinary, domestic. It would make what came next all the more disarming. Mr. Green had called earlier. The papers are filed, he said. The injunction's in place. She can't complete the sale without you knowing. Good, I told him. Then it's time she heard the truth, from me. By the time Lydia arrived, the house glowed with late afternoon light. She stepped in, smiling like a politician. You look nice today, Mom, she said, kissing my cheek. Are those cookies? Smells amazing. Sit down, I said gently. We need to talk. Her smile flickered, but she obeyed, placing her handbag carefully beside her chair. What's wrong? You sound serious. I poured tea for both of us, steadying my hands. I've been thinking about everything you've done for me lately, I began. The bills, the paperwork, the home sale. She froze, her cup halfway to her lips. "Mom!" "I know," I said, cutting her off softly. "I know about the listing. The forged documents. The loan you took out using this house as collateral." Her face drained of color. "Who told you that?" "Does it matter?" I asked. "You did it." "That's what matters." For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the clock ticking above the mantel. Then she laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. "You don't understand how the world works anymore, Mom. This house is an opportunity. You've been sitting on it for years, letting it rot around you. I was trying to turn it into something that mattered." "Something that mattered to who?" I asked quietly. "Because it stopped being about me a long time ago." Her voice rose. "You're being dramatic." "I was securing your future. You think I'd let anything happen to you? I was going to make sure you were taken care of." "By lying to me? By taking what isn't yours?" Her hands trembled, her eyes darting toward the hallway as if looking for escape. "You signed the forms, Mom. You did this. You can't turn around now and blame me for your mistake." I leaned back, meeting her gaze. "You're right. I did sign those papers, but I also recorded every word you said in this kitchen after that day." The blood drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" I reached under the table and pressed play on the small recorder. Lydia's own voice filled the room. Cold, calculating, unmistakable. "She's still here." "Don't worry, I'll handle it. The closing's in 3 weeks." She lunged for the device, but I slid it out of reach. "There's more," I said. "The lawyer has copies. The police will too, if I decide to hand them over." Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, the confidence slipping away. I saw her as she was, not the polished woman with plans and ambition, but the frightened child who used to cry when she broke a dish. Somewhere along the line, she traded her conscience for control. "Why would you do this?" I asked. My voice cracked, not with anger, but with grief. "You had everything, your family, your home, your father's love. Why wasn't it enough?" Tears welled in her eyes, but they were too late. "I just wanted," she faltered. "I just wanted something that was mine." "You had me," I said softly. "You always had me." The silence that followed was unbearable. Then Ethan appeared at the doorway, his expression grim. "Lydia," he said quietly, "it's over." She turned toward him, stunned. How could you?" "I had to," he said. "You crossed a line." Lydia stood, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. "You're all against me. You think I'm the villain here, but I was the only one trying to move forward. You're both stuck in the past." "Maybe," I said, rising slowly, "but at least I can still sleep at night." Her composure finally cracked. "You'll regret this, Mom. You'll see what happens when you turn your own family into enemies." "I already have," I said. She stared at me for a long time, breathing hard, before storming out. The door slammed behind her, the echo rolling through the house like thunder. For a long while, none of us spoke. The clock kept ticking, indifferent to the wreckage left in its wake. Ethan looked at me, guilt etched deep in his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. I placed a hand on his arm. "You didn't do this. She did. And now she'll have to live with it." Outside, the wind stirred through the trees, scattering the last of the fallen leaves. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace settle in my chest. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Just the steady rhythm of truth reclaiming its place. And as I turned off the recorder and set it aside, I realized that justice didn't always come from courts or handcuffs. Sometimes it came from simply refusing to be silenced. 3 weeks later, I found myself sitting in the same courthouse where Harold once stood for jury duty, a building that always smelled faintly of old paper and rain. The marble floors gleamed under the morning light, cold and precise, much like the justice I was about to witness. Mr. Green sat beside me, calm and composed, a quiet sentinel. His briefcase rested between us, filled with documents that no longer frightened me. They were my shield now, the proof of everything Lydia had done. Across the aisle sat my daughter, her once confident posture now rigid. Lydia's immaculate hair was pinned too tightly, her hands clenched around a leather purse like she could squeeze dignity out of it. She didn't look at me, not once. The judge, a tall woman with silver hair and a voice like tempered steel, read the case summary aloud. Forgery, misrepresentation, fraudulent property transfer. Each word struck the air like a gavel, sharp and deliberate. Lydia shifted in her seat, her lawyer whispering something I couldn't hear. When it was my turn to speak, I rose slowly. The courtroom hushed. I hadn't planned to say much. Mr. Green told me the evidence spoke for itself. But as I stood there, looking at my daughter, the same child who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms, I felt the need to speak, not for the court, but for myself. I didn't come here for revenge, I began, my voice steady. I came because truth deserves its place, just like every person does. I trusted my daughter. I raised her in this very house, taught her that honesty was the foundation of every kind of home. But she forgot. Maybe she thought I was too old to notice, too weak to matter. I glanced at her then, and her eyes flickered toward mine before darting away. She forged my name, took what wasn't hers, and called it love. But love built on deceit isn't love, it's ownership, and I won't be owned. When I finished, the room was silent except for the faint scratching of the clerk's pen. Lydia's lawyer tried to argue that it was a misunderstanding, that I had given verbal consent, that she had acted under emotional strain. But the recordings spoke louder. Each clip played with cruel clarity, her voice discussing closing dates, deposits, and keeping the old woman calm. When her own words filled the courtroom, Lydia's composure shattered. She broke into sobs halfway through the playback, hiding her face in her hands. Her lawyer reached out to steady her, but she waved him off. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered hoarsely. I just wanted something better. The judge regarded her coolly. You sought something better by destroying someone's home. That's not ambition, Ms. Turner. That's theft. The verdict came swiftly after that. The forged documents were voided, the sale declared illegal, and all property rights restored solely to me. Lydia's license was suspended pending review for professional misconduct. But it wasn't the punishment that made the moment heavy. It was the quiet after, the finality. Outside the courthouse, rain had begun to fall, soft and cold. Mr. Green handed me the final paperwork in a sealed envelope. It's over, he said gently. You're protected now. I nodded, staring out at the gray sky. Do you think she'll ever forgive herself? He hesitated. That's not your burden to carry anymore. We parted at the steps, and I lingered there a while, watching people hurry past with umbrellas and briefcases, all of them moving forward, unknowing. Behind me, Lydia stood at the entrance, her makeup streaked with rain and tears. For a moment, our eyes met, mother and daughter, stranger and stranger. I'm sorry, she whispered. I couldn't tell if she meant it. I only nodded. So am I. Then I turned and walked away. By the time I reached home, the rain had stopped. The house greeted me in its familiar stillness, the creak of the floorboards, the faint scent of Harold's aftershave still lingering in the hallway. I set the papers on the table and exhaled deeply. Justice, I realized, isn't loud. It doesn't always come with applause or closure. Sometimes it's just a door quietly closing behind you, sealing off the part of your life that tried to undo you. As the evening light filled the room, I brewed a cup of tea and sat by the window. Outside, the garden shimmered with fresh rain, the soil dark and rich. I thought of Lydia, of what greed had cost her, and I prayed that someday she'd remember the woman I was before she saw me as an obstacle. And in that small, quiet prayer, I found something that looked very much like peace. Autumn came early that year. The air sharpened, the light softened, and the maples along Maple Grove burned crimson at their edges, like the season itself was closing a chapter. The courthouse weeks were behind me, but their echoes lingered. Paperwork, phone calls, the sudden quiet after a storm. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt hollow, like a house after guests have left, tidy but echoing. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Mr. Green called. His tone carried that same careful calm he always used when the truth might sting. "Margaret," he said, "I thought you should hear this from me. Lydia's house is on the market." For a long moment, I said nothing. The sound of the grandfather clock filled the space between us, each tick deliberate, like a heartbeat I hadn't noticed in years. "Is she selling it herself?" I finally asked. "No, the bank listed it. She defaulted on the loan tied to your property. They're liquidating her assets." I closed my eyes. In the silence that followed, I felt no triumph, no glee, only the deep, exhausted ache of watching something inevitable unfold. "What happens to her now?" "She'll have to start over," he said gently. "The bank will seize most of what's left. But there's something else. If you wanted to, you could buy it. Quietly." "Buy her house?" "It would be poetic," he said, "and perfectly legal." After we hung up, I stood by the kitchen window, watching the golden leaves drift across the garden Harold had once planted with such care. Poetic justice, Green had called it. But poetry, I'd learned, was often written in grief. Still, that night, I opened the envelope he'd given me after the trial, my restored deed, the small insurance payout from the trust Harold had left, and the compensation Lydia had been ordered to repay. It wasn't much, but it was enough to reclaim something. The following morning, I visited the bank. The clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, looked surprised when she saw the property I wanted. "You're aware this house belonged to your daughter?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm aware." The process took hours. Signatures, stamps, silent pauses. By the time I stepped back into the cold air, the sky had turned the color of pewter. The purchase was complete. Lydia's house, modern, cold, all glass and chrome, was mine now. When I drove there the next day, I half expected to see her waiting on the porch, arms crossed, defiant as ever. But the driveway was empty, the windows dark. Inside, the air smelled of lavender cleaner and something sadder. Emptiness. The rooms were pristine, untouched, the walls still echoing with arguments and ambitions. I walked through slowly, touching nothing. There were traces of her everywhere, a forgotten mug in the sink, a stack of unopened mail, a child's crayon drawing tucked behind the fridge magnet. Her children. My grandchildren. They were with Ethan now, in another town, trying to make sense of what adults ruin with pride. In the living room, I stood by the large window that overlooked the street. The same sunlight that once warmed my house filtered through hers now, though here it seemed colder. The space was beautiful, but soulless, like a photograph of happiness instead of the thing itself. I thought of what to do next. Selling it would have been simple, even satisfying. But revenge, I realized, is a short-lived comfort. What lasts is purpose. That evening, I called Mr. Green again. "Robert," I said, "I want to donate it." "Donate?" "Yes, to the women's shelter downtown. They've been turning people away for months. They don't have enough beds. I want this place to mean something." He was silent for a beat, then said softly, "That's extraordinary, Margaret." Harold would have been proud. "I don't know about proud," I said, "but I think he'd understand." Within weeks, the paperwork was finalized. The shelter repainted the walls in warm colors, filled the rooms with bunk beds, soft blankets, laughter. When I visited during their opening, the director clasped my hands. "You have no idea what this means," she said, eyes bright. "Oh, I think I do," I told her. Outside, the sign had been hung above the doorway. Harold House, a name I'd suggested, one that felt like closure and beginning all at once. As I drove home, the sun dipped low behind the trees, spilling gold over the roof lines of Maple Grove. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a victim reclaiming her past. I felt like a woman planting something new in the soil of her survival. Lydia's choices had taken my peace, but they had also handed me clarity. The chance to turn loss into shelter, betrayal into belonging. When I reached home, the porch light flicked on automatically, bathing the old steps in a soft, steady glow. I paused there, listening to the quiet hum of the evening. Somewhere, wind chimes whispered above Harold's garden, their song gentle, forgiving. Poetic justice, I thought, wasn't about punishment. It was about balance, about restoring the world, one small, deliberate act at a time. And as I stepped inside, I realized that for the first time in years, the house didn't just feel safe, it felt whole. Spring crept into Maple Grove like a whispered apology, slow, tender, full of second chances. The frost melted from the eaves, the robins returned to the pear tree, and the scent of damp earth filled the mornings. For the first time in months, I woke up without that heavy pause between breath and purpose. The house, my house, no longer felt like a battlefield or a museum. It felt alive again. I started tending the garden the way Harold used to, on my knees, fingers deep in the soil, letting the earth stain my skin. The hydrangeas had survived another winter, stubborn as I was, pushing out new shoots in quiet defiance. When the first buds appeared, pale green and trembling, I felt something inside me shift. Growth after ruin. It wasn't fast, but it was certain. Every Saturday, Ethan came by with the children. They filled the house with laughter and motion, their voices spilling down the hallway like sunlight. Emma, the youngest, had taken to following me around the garden, asking 1,000 questions about every leaf and worm. "Grandma," she said once, crouching beside a patch of tulips, "why do flowers die every year if they're just going to come back?" I smiled, brushing the soil from my palms. "Because even beautiful things need rest," I told her, "and sometimes they come back stronger." Ethan watched from the porch, his expression softer than I remembered. The tension that had once wrapped around him, tight with loyalty and guilt, had eased. He helped repair the broken fence one afternoon, hammering in rhythm while I held the board steady. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly, "for not giving up on any of us, even after everything." "You don't need to thank me," I said. "You just need to remember." He nodded, eyes lowered. "I do. Every day." By late April, news of the new women's shelter spread through town. The Willow Creek Gazette ran a small feature. Harold House opens its doors, a beacon for second chances. They quoted the director, who said something that stayed with me. The home was built on loss, but it stands for hope. That line found its way to my refrigerator door. Pinned beneath a photograph of Harold holding Lydia as a baby, I couldn't look at one without thinking of the other, what was lost and what might still be redeemed. Helen, my old neighbor, began visiting again. She'd stopped by Les after the trial, unsure of what to say, but when she returned, she came bearing lemon bars and her usual warmth. "You look 10 years younger," she said, settling into her favorite chair. "Justice suits you." I laughed softly. "I don't know if it's justice or peace. Maybe both." Helen took a sip of her tea, her sharp eyes glinting. "Peace is better. Justice ends things. Peace lets you live with them." That night, I wrote her words down in my journal. I had started keeping one again, a habit Harold encouraged during our first years together. "Write it down," he'd always say, "so it doesn't eat you alive." The entries weren't grand or dramatic, just small notations of ordinary grace. April 12th, the hydrangeas are blooming again. April 16th, Ethan laughed today. A real laugh. April 19th, I walked to the bakery alone and didn't feel lonely. Each line felt like reclaiming a part of myself I'd let Lydia's shadow dim. Then one morning in May, I received a letter. The envelope was thin, handwritten and unfamiliar. Inside was a short note. Mom, I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but I wanted you to know I'm in a program now. Financial counseling, community service. I've been volunteering at a shelter nearby, not Harold House, but one like it. I'm sorry. Truly. Lydia. I sat with the letter for a long time, the paper trembling slightly between my fingers. There were no promises, no explanations, no manipulations this time. Just remorse, fragile and unfinished, but real. I didn't cry. I simply folded the note, placed it inside my journal, and whispered, "That's enough." That evening, the sky burned gold over Maple Grove. The air carried the hum of distant laughter from the neighborhood kids, the smell of cut grass, the rustle of renewal. I brewed 2 cups of tea, as I always had, mine with honey, his with sugar, and carried them out to the porch. Harold's chair sat opposite mine, the paint worn smooth from years of use. I placed 1 cup there anyway. Some rituals weren't meant to end. The wind shifted through the trees, cool and tender, brushing against my cheek like a familiar touch. And for a moment, I could almost hear his voice again, low, steady, teasing me about overwatering the garden. Harold House, I murmured, smiling faintly. You'd have liked that name. The stars began to appear, one by one, quiet witnesses to everything that had passed, and everything still waiting to begin. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the woman who had been betrayed. I felt like the woman who had survived and built something from the ashes. The world, I realized, has a strange way of circling back to gentleness when you stop demanding that it owes you fairness. Sometimes peace doesn't arrive like thunder or apology. Sometimes it just blooms quietly, like hydrangeas after winter. And as I sat there, tea cooling beside me, the garden breathing softly under the stars, I whispered the same words I used to say when Lydia was small and frightened of the dark. It's all right now, sweetheart. We're home. It's been almost a year since everything changed, since the house was almost lost, then found again. And since I learned that survival isn't the same as living, I can say that now with a steadiness that once felt impossible. Time hasn't erased the pain, but it has softened its edges, turned it into something I can hold without flinching. Maple Grove is alive this morning. From my porch, I can see children racing their bicycles down the lane, their laughter bouncing off the fences Harold painted so many years ago. The lilac tree is in bloom again, its scent drifting through the open window, mingling with the faint aroma of tea. Everything feels slower now, not because I've grown old, but because I've learned to let peace take its time. Inside, the mantel tells our story. 3 wooden boxes rest side by side. The cedar one that started it all, the small carved one James made in my father's workshop, and the family tree we built together. Their surfaces glow in the morning light, their presence both weight and comfort. Sometimes I catch myself talking to them, to Harold, to Lydia, even to the ghosts of my younger self. Ethan comes by often these days. He brings the children after school, their backpacks slung carelessly over one shoulder, their faces bright and flushed. They scatter through the house like wild birds, touching everything as if rediscovering it each time. The sound of them fills the spaces that once echoed with silence. Last Sunday, Lydia came too. Not the Lydia who used to stride through the house with clipped words and sharper intentions, but a quieter one, softer around the eyes, humbled in the way life sometimes insists upon. She stood in the doorway for a long time before crossing the threshold, as if asking the house's permission to enter. "I wasn't sure you'd want me here," she said. "I wasn't sure either," I replied honestly. "But I think we both deserve to find out." She smiled faintly then, an unsteady, human kind of smile. And for the first time in years, I saw my daughter again. Not the woman who betrayed me, but the girl who once danced barefoot in the rain, laughing when her dress stuck to her knees. We didn't talk about the past that day. We talked about Emma's school recital, about the hydrangeas she used to help me plant, about small, ordinary things. And somehow, that was enough. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't one grand gesture. It's a series of small silences you stop filling with blame. Later that afternoon, we all went to visit Harold House. The director met us at the gate, her arms open wide. Inside, the rooms were alive with noise and color. Children playing, women cooking, laughter rising from the kitchen. Lydia stopped in the middle of the hallway, tears shining in her eyes. "You turned it into something beautiful," she whispered. I looked at her, my voice quiet but steady. "No, we did. You gave me the chance to." She nodded, unable to speak, and for the first time in a long time, we stood side by side without a single wall between us. That night, after they'd all gone home, I sat in the garden alone. The air was cool, full of that soft hum that only spring evenings carry, the sound of the world forgiving itself. The young maple tree we'd planted last year had grown taller, its branches stretching toward the stars. I touched its trunk, rough beneath my fingertips, and felt its quiet pulse of life. Harold used to say trees were God's way of reminding us that patience is never wasted. I didn't understand him then. I do now. Growth is never instant. Healing is never loud. But both happen, in their own time, if you let them. I took my notebook from the porch table and wrote the final entry. May 28th. The circle is whole again. The house stands, the garden blooms, the silence has turned to song. What was broken has found its place, not as it was, but as it should be. I closed the notebook and set it beside my tea. The sky was fading to lavender, the first stars peeking through the thinning clouds. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the faint chime of laughter. Lydia's maybe, or Emma's, or perhaps just memory blending with the evening wind. And as I sat there, beneath the wide, forgiving sky, I realized something simple yet profound. Life doesn't always give you back what you've lost. Sometimes it gives you something quieter, truer, a peace that stays. I leaned back in Harold's old chair, closed my eyes and whispered to the night, "We're home now, all of us." The wind rustled through the lilac branches like an answer, and for the first time, I believed it.